Hello and welcome. This is a video lecture review for the textbook, A Practical Guide to Digital Forensics. This is a Pearson-owned and published textbook. ISBN number 13, number 9780137459759. The important part to point out is this is a lecture review using their official PowerPoints. They own the copyright to all of this material. I am just preparing a video lecture for the slides which they provided. They own all copyright information. All information is Pearson VUE. Again, I'm just doing a lecture review. With that said, let's go ahead and jump right on in. Alright, Chapter 1, the scope of digital forensics. Again, this is a very high-level overview, but essentially when I talk about the definition and the importance of digital forensics, again, keep in mind with the word digital forensics, that's all digital forensics, so we're going to keep it kind of high-level. Understand the different types of digital evidence and how they are used. We're going to be mainly focusing on computer digital forensics, but again, there are other variations of digital forensics. We're going to look at understanding the skills, training, and education required to become a digital forensics investigator, kind of that high-arching one. We're also going to know the job opportunities in the fields of digital forensics. We're going to look at the history of digital forensics, and we're going to be looking at basically the agencies, both the U.S. and internationally involved or connected ones for digital forensics. So those are the main objectives for today. Let's jump in and let's talk about definitions. So I do apologize for the level of detail on these slides. Again, Pearson made them, so I'm just using their content. So with that said, definitions. Computer forensics is the retrieval, analysis, and the use of digital evidence in either a civil or criminal investigation. Civil or criminal, you can also think private or public institution. Basically like a corporation, more things like civil. Criminal investigation is more going to be against the law, the court system, local law enforcement, things like that. Who initiates the different ones are equally important. Who provides the authority to initiate a criminal investigation? That would be the court system or the legal system, and that authority is granted typically to law enforcement agencies. So those are kind of important. Digital evidence, that's another one. Digital evidence is any medium that can store digital files. That's the potential source for evidence for a digital forensics investigator. Now we are going to start being more specific. We're dealing with computer forensics investigation. So I'm going to grab my pen. So that could be a hard drive or long-term storage. So SSD, HDD or traditional hard drive, HDD. Could be a USB, like a flash drive. Could be an older IDE or a SATA drive. So it really just depends. These are going to be basically long-term storage or NVMe or M.2 based drives, or again short-term. Could be a USB. The computer forensics subsection of digital forensics is the science because of the accepted practice used for acquiring and examining the evidence, and that is, when done so correctly, the ability to admiss it in court. So basically the admissibility, the actual function of taking what you've gone through, following the appropriate approved process to submit it to the court. What does that mean? Forensically sound, essentially. That means during the acquisition of the evidence and throughout the investigative process, the evidence has remained in the original collected state. There's a lot of different ways to play that, but essentially you collect digital evidence, let's say a hard drive or a USB drive. From there, you actually do your investigation, but not off of the original. You clone it, a bit by bit, 100% identical copy of the source evidence. You hash the two to verify that they are identical, your source and your copy, and if the hashes are identical, then you're going to work off of your copy. That way, there is no manipulation of the original data. And again, you'd be following an approved process through the court system, your state and local as well as federal laws. So you're going to be working through a process. Lastly, moreover, everyone who has been in contact with the evidence needs to be accounted for. Again, chain of custody. Who's seen it, who looked at it, who touched it, who thought about it. Not really to that detail, but essentially it needs to be heavily documented so that what was collected and how it went through the system is all heavily documented so that someone cannot say that the media, the evidence, was altered in any way. And you can prove who had access to what and when. All right, so since we talked about digital evidence, the question then becomes is, what are the different types? So email is a type of digital evidence. It's a digital data file that is located on a compute device, whether it's a computer or a mobile phone. So again, email is probably the most common important type of digital evidence. Not the only, but one of the more important ones. You can also have images or videos that are artifacts. You could also have history, so fragments or other artifacts that show websites visited, your search history, all of that's tracked. Even the insertion of a USB is tracked on your system. You can actually pull the log to see what was plugged in, when was it unplugged, and you can see all of those things. The data file that you'll retrieve from that is more of a log file, but again, that's also an artifact. Artifact is just a clever way of saying evidence or a proof of evidence. Other types of digital forensics could be a cell phone, though that one's more subjective because the phone itself could also be considered a compute device, and in reality, it's probably going to have its own special digital forensics as well. IoT devices, industrial devices, networking devices, DVRs, like a digital video recording system, camera systems, all of them are also going to have different types of digital evidence that are used. That's why it's important to understand what type of digital forensics we are talking about. So, if we're focusing on computer forensics, every compute device should have additional data called metadata. So if you look at a data file, you can see when it was created, when it was modified, when it was accessed. All of those things are considered part of the metadata. What are the other attributes? Are there any specific attributes for that file? Are there dimensions? Is there camera data? So this happens to be a JPEG, which is a image-based file. What camera took this? Was there GPS data? Was there camera lens data? Was there focal length data? That's all part of the metadata. So metadata is data about an artifact, or data about data, essentially. So we also have other types of things. So here is a skimming device used to capture data stored on magnetic strips for an ATM. So this guy is fairly small. But again, this is another type of electronic component that is used for digital device or digital evidence for device collection. So if we're talking web communication between a computer and a web server, a request and delivery, again, this is going to be digital evidence. This is going to be evidence of website content. So what skills are you going to need? You're going to have some computer skills. Computer science knowledge, I wouldn't say to that level, but you need to at least have some computer skills. On your team, you're going to need a legal expert. Someone that's familiar with all of the current laws, rules, regulations. You're not doing this alone. Typically, you're going to work as a team. It's very unlikely that you're going to be the forensics investigator with all the skills. That's not realistic. So you'll have to have someone on your team with legal expertise, i.e. typically a lawyer. You're going to have someone with good communication skills. Now that could be the digital forensics analysts. They're going to be writing reports, so their ability to write a report and communicate their findings are going to be important. You might need a linguistic ability. Again, that one's kind of more subjective. I'm not saying 100%, but it is definitely one of those things that could easily be there, but not necessarily. You definitely will have to keep current on your learning skills. That means you're not going to do one and done. You're going to have a lot of information that you're going to have to keep learning. Every day there's new processes, new methodologies, new things coming out in the field of digital forensics that you're going to have to be aware of. So the ability to continuously learn is going to be huge. Past that is confidentiality. You will have to have a certain level of ability to keep things confidential. Not an appreciation, but a legal requirement to keep things self-contained. So these are some of the skills. One of the other ones is be curious. Be a problem or a puzzle solver. Someone that wants to investigate and see what's going on. Like, those are good skills. I know that's not on the list, but I've noticed through work experience that is a great attribute to have. It's just your ability to be inquisitive. If you're more willing to think about, hey, how do we do this? Those are good skills. They're definitely good skills to have. So let's look at the importance of computer forensics. So basically, the Bureau of Labor Statistics does recognize this as an area of importance. Estimated crime and job opportunities are increasing. I don't like reading the 12% because in reality this adjusts every few months, and in reality we know digital forensics experience and job opportunities are on the increase. The increase in employment opportunities result from basically the increase in crime. Basically, we have more cybercrime now going on, and we have fewer and fewer specialists able to tackle these types of crimes. Again, that's on the criminal side. If you're dealing with forensics at a private corporation, a business, that's going to be more your civil. Well, the fun part there is they also need forensics investigators. It is not just law enforcement. Crimes involving technology are drastically on the rise. So does our ability to investigate those crimes. So skilled forensics investigators focusing on computers will have job opportunities within public firms, private firms, and alike. And again, opportunities are only going to be increasing. So history. Basically, in 1981, IBM introduced the first main PC, what we think of a PC as today. In 1984, FBI establishes the Magnetic Media Program, later known as CART. And also in 1984, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was founded. Then we had the HTCIA was founded as part of California. Then we had the Electronic Crime Task Force, ECTF, that's a big one. Then we had the first pass of a congressional law dealing with Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Then there was an international conference for computer evidence that took place early in the 90s. In 94, we had another congressional bill passed called the Crime Bill, and basically the USS began working on crimes against children. Sadly, a lot of my investigations focus on crimes dealing with child exploitation, but that's not the only area that is out there in existence. One of the big ones, but not the only one. In 94, we had Mosaic Netscape, that was a main web browser. In 95, an international group for Organizations for Computer Evidence, IOCE, was formed. Then in the US, founded the New York Electronics Crime Task Force, again, focusing on the similar name, ECTF. Then we had the first Regional Computer Forensics Lab, that was in San Diego. Then IRS Criminal Investigation Division, they started using iLook. Then in 2001, after 9/11, the U.S. Patriot Act and the USS were directed to establish the ECTF nationwide. After that, later in the year, in 2021, Interpol developed a database for exploited children. Again, children are going to be a high focus area here, just because sadly there's a lot of exploitation of children, and that's one of the primary crimes looked at. Not the only crime, but one of the big ones. In 2002, we had DHS. 2003, the Protect Act was passed to fight against child exploitation. 2003, fusion centers were established. That's a combination of private and public sector resources coming together to discuss cybercrime. 2007, the National Computer Forensics Institution, NCFI, was established. 2008, formation of Interpol's Computer Forensics Analysis Unit was approved. Then we had 2009, European branch of the ECTF was formed. That was in Italy. Then the following year, 2010, the next ECTF was formed in the UK. In 2011, the Patriot Sunset Extension Act was enacted. 2013, a whistleblower named Edward Snowden leaked information on NSA to the Russians, basically pointing out that there was a lot of fraud and abuse that was underway, and that was mainly due to how the US government was collecting data and using it to spy on their citizens. Edward Snowden was a US citizen who leaked this, but because technically it was classified information, was flagged as a traitor and had to flee to Russia. In 2015, the trial of the Silk Road ended with the conviction of its creator. So here we're having more web-based content, more web-based crimes. The Silk Road, for example. 2015, the Cyber Information Sharing Act was enacted. 2016, the Investigative Power Act in the UK was enacted. Then we have APFS, which is a forensics tool introduced by Apple with iOS 10. Then Europe introduced the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations for all EU citizens, so that was a big one. All of these, and then between 2018 and 2024, a lot of additional laws have been enacted, all in the form of cyber protection and digital forensics. So it's not like we've just stopped, it's just we've been doing more and more each year. So let's look at this a little bit more in depth. So let me grab my pen. Come on. Oh, it moved slides. In the 80s, we had the personal PC. We had our computers. There were electronic bulletin boards or blogs used for communication between hackers. That meant that after that, again, subsequently, hacker groups such as groups like Legions of Doom started emerging. In 83, we had a war game film produced. Basically, this is the public to the concept of hacking with personal computers to gain access to government computers. That was a big thing. In 84, we had other people publishing material. They published the 2600 Hacker Quarterly, which facilitated the exchange of hacking ideas. Also in 84, FBI established the Magnetic Media Program, which that became the Computer Analysis and Response Team, known as CART. And they were basically the FBI's primary response for computer forensics examination. Also in 84, we had Congress establish the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Again, you're not going to be able to leave that one alone. Exploit crimes with children are a big push for digital forensics in the realm of computer forensics. Not the only one, but one of the big ones. In the 90s, the impact of the internet, we had the boom of our websites, web browsers. It's got graphical, and then we had streaming data. In 98, Defense Reform Initiative Directorate 27 directed the U.S. Air Force to establish joint DoD computer forensics labs. The IRS also did their investigative crime unit. 94, Congress mandated the U.S. apply its forensics and technical knowledge to criminal investigations that were on the rise. Those aren't going away. Since early 90s, computer crime has drastically increased. Collective or organized crime, what most people would think is like the mob, well, they haven't really changed a whole lot. Just they're no longer extorting people physically. They're now doing it more in a digital realm. 2001, I know that's not in the 90s, but 2001, after 9/11, basically we had the U.S. Patriot Act mandated by the U.S. Secret Service to expand the successful portion of the New York ECTF, which was the Electronics Crime Task Force, and that was also put nationwide. So these are some of the highlights from the 80s and 90s. Agencies involved, pick a government agency. IRS, DoD, the military, our federal law enforcement, FBI. We have national groups like the National White Collar Crime Center. We have InfoGuard, which is a subsection of the FBI for training and fusion centers. We have international groups like Interpol. So again, there are lots and lots of agencies that are not just U.S. government that are part of this. So, in this chapter, we looked at definition and the importance of areas for digital forensics, reviewed the types of digital evidence, looked at the skills, training, and education required to be an investigator, looked at job opportunities, the history, as well as agencies. Thank you. Alright, that concludes our lecture review. If you have any questions or concerns or anything, please feel free to reach out. Again, communication is kind of important. You being able to at least discuss, hey, I have this type of question, let me know so that I can figure out a good solution. Thank you.